Okay, so good morning, everybody. The official good morning this time. The one before was the unofficial good morning. Lovely to see so many of you joining us this morning for this talk by Christian Turton, who I will introduce in more detail shortly. My name is John Chippenhall. I am the CAS Outreach Manager for the Northwest, and this session is part of the CAS Virtual Showcase 2020. Which has been all last week and this week a huge range of engaging, informative talks and workshops to do with anything computing education related. This session is an introduction to the Everyone Can Code resources and Swift Playground from Apple for Key Stage 2. And just a couple of housekeeping points before we start the session. Any questions that you might have, please pop into the question box. I'm going to monitor that for you, Christian, if that's okay, and then we'll feed you some questions, interrupt you with a couple of questions on the way through, and then we can wrap up with some questions at the end. You are all attendees are in listen only mode, so that is the way to communicate with us through the questions box. And please, if you're tweeting about the sessions you're engaging with as part of CAS Virtual Showcase, please do use the hashtag CAS Virtual 20 on things like social media like Twitter. So we've got Christian here with us this morning. Christian is the Primary Computing Hub lead for the Sandringham Computing Hub as part of the National Centre for Computing Education. Prior to this, Christian's got a wealth of experience in supporting schools with education technology, computing curriculum and online safety as a local authority consultant for Apple as part of the Apple Professional Learning Specialist Programme and as the co-director of the London Connected Learning Centre. So there's a bit of an introduction to yourself, Christian. I'm looking forward to this session. I've got my iPad here with Swift Playground ready to go. So I will hand over to you. I'm going to pop my camera off and go on mute, but I will be monitoring things and feed you some questions as we go through.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Okay, so I hope you can all see my screen now. Yeah, and I might ask you a few things as we're going through, just to kind of ask you to put things into the chat window. So hello everyone, great introduction there, thank you very much. I'm Christian Turton, primary lead for the Sandringham Computing Hub, part of the National Centre for Computing Education, and also an Apple Professional Learning Specialist. So worked with lots of schools on supporting them to get started with kind of iPads, and actually at Sandringham School, which is where I work now, we are one-to-one with tablet devices in Key Stage 3 and in Key Stage 4. So I'll mention a little bit about our hub just at the end, a little bit of a plug at the end, but our Twitter handle there, if you want to tag anything as we're going through, is Computing Hub SAC. So this session is looking at Everyone Can Code and Swift Playgrounds. So I'll give you a bit of an introduction to that. So to start with, what is Swift? So Swift is a programming language from Apple. Now we've probably heard when we talk about programming languages in education, we hear about Python a lot, and it's absolutely right because Python is very widely used. But Swift I think is a really interesting one to use at Key Stage 2, and especially towards the end of Key Stage 2. It is encouraged by Apple for use in creating apps for the Apple App Store, and it's used in a large number of the kind of top apps in the App Store as well. So it's definitely something that's relevant for students. And what I particularly like about the resources that we're going to look at is that I think they're really well scaffolded and structured for students. So we're going to go and so today we're going to have a look at the Apple's Everyone Can Code resources. I may mention another app as well if we get time. I'll see how we're doing for time. And we're going to look at the Swift Playground app. So just to be clear, the resources come in the form of an Apple book, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. And then there's Swift Playground is the app that you can download and install on your iPad. Both are completely free as well.
Christian, sorry to interrupt you already, but we've had a question come through, just people preparing to work along with you. Can they use this on their iPhone? Will that work okay?
So unfortunately, Swift Playgrounds is only available on iPad, and I think that's just because of the processing power needed to run it. So you can't download Swift Playgrounds onto the iPhone, unfortunately.
Okay, so grab an iPad if you've got an iPad device, but not on the iPhone.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I mean, if I'm going to pause a couple of times for you to try things out on the iPad. I was going to say, if you haven't got an iPad, please don't worry too much. But you can kind of follow it up a bit later. I always think though, when you're looking at something, it's good to get started with it if you can, and you do have that iPad available. But don't worry too much if you don't have that in front of you. So yeah, so I'll give you some time to explore as well as we're going through. So yeah, as we mentioned already, Swift Playgrounds is a free app that you can download onto your iPad. So it'd be really great to get that downloaded onto your iPad if you can. And in a moment, I'll pause for a few minutes for you to download something inside the Playgrounds app. So I'll give you a little bit of time to get that kind of sorted and organised. So just to kind of frame this in the national curriculum as well, and there's a great resource from Computing at School, which is Computing the National Curriculum, a guide for primary teachers. Who's read this? You'd like to tap in the chat window maybe to say if you've read this before? Anyone come across this?
So
no one. Okay.
I've got lots of yeses coming through the question box. Yeah, lots of people are aware of it.
Okay, I'll keep an eye on that one. Yeah, great. Okay, good. So a lot of people have come across that. But yeah, if you haven't read it, I think it's really a key thing to read, a key thing to be aware of and read. But yeah, so we look at the national curriculum in that through kind of 3 areas. So computer science, IT, and digital literacy, and they've helpfully arranged the different statements from national curriculum into those 3 areas. So clearly we're talking about coding or programming today, and we're focusing on Key Stage 2. So a lot of what we're looking at will fall into this area here, into computer science, but there will be some links also to the kind of IT areas and digital literacy as well. And I'll kind of highlight those in links, but so this will be more the computer science part. Now, just before I carry on and before we get into the practical nuts and bolts of the curriculum and having a look at it, I think it's worth mentioning that there is the opportunity to get an Apple Teacher badge. Now, whether or not you decide to do that, it's definitely worth, if you're using iPads in your school, signing up for the Apple Teacher Learning Centre. And you'll find that at appleteacher.apple.com, and you just need to use your iCloud ID to log into that. But there's loads and loads of resources and ideas for teachers in here, generally about using iPads in the classroom. But in particular, it links into some key resources around Everyone Can Code. So just to mention that, so some of the resources that you can find in there, there's a couple of links there. One is around Swift Coding Club, and that's the idea of introducing this or trying this out for the first time by running a coding club. So one of the things I like about Everyone Can Code is that it's quite challenging for students. Certainly, I've worked with Key Stage 2 students on this, and I know that they can manage it. But it can be a little bit daunting as a teacher to start with. So giving it that first try in a coding club can be quite a good thing to do. And if I just go out to have a look at those resources, you'll see it's got a lot of ideas for how you do that. I'm going to go over a lot of the content for this today anyway, so a lot of the things that are mentioned in here, but even down to the idea of kind of templates for getting t-shirts made, or stickers and posters for your learners to advertise the club and things like that. So yeah, really helpful resource to give you ideas and take you through a guide to running Everyone Can Code in a club. And there's also, you'll find in there, and also linked to from the Apple books, is the curriculum guide. And again, this is a really useful resource. So I'll just quickly show that. So it talks you through the whole Everyone Can Code curriculum. And here it's also got kind of a guide, a curriculum pathway. Now we're looking at these puzzle books today, Everyone Can Code puzzles, and they are free downloads on the Apple Bookstore, as said. The adventures are being released shortly, and it's recommended for Year 5 and up, so upper Key Stage 2. It says a number of hours for lessons, so it says 45 hours to complete this. So yeah, you could map it across a couple of years, but even so, that's quite a lot of work. So I will suggest the areas that I think are most relevant for the national curriculum. They do go quite advanced, some of these books, so you may just want to pick some of the areas to use for that. So I'll highlight that as we go through, and some of them are quite possible to go through more quickly, but they are organised in quite a nice way as well. So I've just shown that, mentioned that. So the two books that you would get from the Apple bookstore to get started with this, there's a student guide, which is the one on the left-hand side here, so the Everyone Can Code puzzles. That's going to be the orange book. And then on the right-hand side, there's a teacher guide. Now, the teacher guide has all of the student content in it, but after each chapter for the students, it then has further information and considerations for the teacher in planning for that. So these are the chapters that you'll find in the Everyone Can Code puzzles book. So some of these will look familiar, some of them might sound a little bit advanced. So going up to, for example, while loops and arrays, types and initialization and so on. So as I said, it does get quite advanced as you're going through this. But we're just going to pick some of these to have a look at today. First though, I said I'll talk about the national curriculum and how that relates a little bit more. Now obviously we're looking particularly at Key Stage 2 at the moment. And I just wanted to link kind of the chapters into the statements in Key Stage 2. So we've got mention of correcting errors in there. So of course, debugging, and in any work you're doing on computer, you're going to be doing some debugging. So as you go through, you'll notice as students create their short programs and their sections of code, they'll need to go and be doing debugging. And in the book, in the curriculum, they also plan what they're going to do beforehand. So they're creating algorithms that they then turn into a program. So that's very much in there as well. But I just had a go at mapping specifically the different, oops, I've gone too far there. Let's just go back. So I had a go at mapping specifically the different chapters onto the curriculum, and it maps pretty well. So for example, in design, write and debug, we've got the chapter on commands that links into writing. We've got decomposing problems into smaller parts, so we've got the functions there. We've got using selection, so using conditional code, and repetition, so there's the for loops chapter, and a bit more advanced, but there's also the while loops chapter you could go onto there, and of course variables as well. So various different areas of the national curriculum are covered by this. I wouldn't suggest that you chuck out everything else and decide to just teach the Everyone Can Code curriculum. I think we're really lucky in computing, especially at primary, in that we have so many great free resources available to us, that I think it's great as a supplement, and you should be picking things, for example, definitely barefoot resources, and definitely taking advantage of Scratch and some of the Scratch resources that are available. And of course, Scratch now runs on iPad in the browser as well. It used to have a problem because it was Flash, but now it works very happily on an iPad browser. Okay. So just before we get into the chapters, it's worth looking at how each of the chapters are constructed and the kind of activities that students do this. And there was an earlier curriculum that came out, and there was quite a lot in there, and it could get a little bit confusing. But they've taken each chapter and organised it really well now. So there's the learn section, and this is always an unplugged activity to do for students to do that relates to that particular area. So if you're looking at, when you look at commands, it has some unplugged activities linked to that. Then there's try, so generally that is going into the learn to code playgrounds and Swift playgrounds, and actually trying out and working through those. There's then an apply section in each chapter, and then you take the learning from what you've been doing and apply it to another activity. So for example, there are some activities around creating art, for example, and through coding in there. So you always apply it then to some particular context, and then connecting it to the real world, connecting it to your world. So for example, in the command section, you actually think about what kind of commands different devices issue. So what commands might a microwave have, what commands might have a light switch have, and so on. So so lot of opportunity then to connect what they've learned to the real life and how it's applied in the real world. So what I'd like to do in a moment, I'm just going to pause for a few minutes. So I'm going to presume that you've got your iPad and you've got Swift Playgrounds downloaded. I mentioned please don't worry if you haven't managed to do that, that's okay. I'm going to click on tap on the Playgrounds app and go into there. Now at the top, I've got a variety of playgrounds already at the top here, but down the bottom here, and it actually might, when you first open it, I think it might pop up to this window anyway, but there's some more playgrounds. If I tap on See All, we can go into here. And what I'd like you to do now is just try downloading Learn to Code 1. So you'll just tap on the Get button there, and that will start downloading. So I'm just going to give you 3 or 4 minutes. I'm just going to stop talking for 3 or 4 minutes. I'm just going to set my timer, make sure I give you enough time. So just give 3 or 4 minutes to start downloading Learn to Code 1 in Swift Playgrounds. And maybe once you've got that started, if you wouldn't mind just typing into we're using the question area.
We're using the questions box. People can type into that.
Yeah, so if you'd like to just tap into the questions box, type in there that you've managed to get it started downloading. Like I said, if you're not got it, so take a 3-minute pause to let you get started with that.
Super, thanks, Christian. Just whilst you're pausing there, would you mind just restarting your camera, because I think it's it might just be for my computer, but I think it's just frozen on a picture of you as opposed to being the camera feed on.
Ah.
Yeah, so let's see if we can get you back live.
That better?
No, I've made it worse.
Any better?
No, I've made it worse because for me it's now just a blank.
Turn it off. Any good?
Unfortunately not, no. Could anyone else just let me know? Are you also just... Oh, right, so, okay, yeah, it's just me, Christian. Everyone else is saying they can see fine.
Oh, okay, brilliant.
So, yeah, I don't know what's going on my end. We've also got lots of people saying downloaded, downloaded, currently downloading.
Fantastic. So you're all much quicker than I thought, so that's fantastic. We can carry on. Brilliant. Okay, so if you just leave that downloading, I'm just going to make a start at getting you through. Now, what I want to do is go through the very first chapter. And as you'll see, this is really accessible. It's really straightforward to get started with and quite easy. So what I want to do is show you that. And then hopefully, by the time I finish talking about that, it'll download it and you'll have a chance to try that yourself before we move on to look at some other areas. So I'm just going to bring up the book now. So I'm going to bring it up on my Mac, but like I said, you can download this on the Apple Books app on your iPad. So I'm in the book here. Let me just go to the introduction here and just go through. So it gives you an introduction. We won't read all of this, but it's got a link to download Swift Playgrounds in it, and teaches you a bit more about Swift Playgrounds. It introduces the idea that I've mentioned of learn, try, apply, and connect. And there's some kind of pictures, some examples of how that works, and talk to you through them in a little bit more detail as well. There's also a pacing guide, so it tells you how long it thinks you should spend on each of the chapters. So if you're spending, let's say you're spending an hour a week on computing, let's say, it suggests the commands one would take 3 weeks to complete. Obviously, all classes, all schools will be different, and they'll be at different places, so you'll be able to adapt that yourself. But that's the useful guide. Okay. Also a section on accessibility there, and if you have students with particular needs, you probably know that the accessibility tools on iPad are brilliant. So there's loads that you can do there, but some useful things there. There are some instructional videos also in sign language there, if that's useful. Okay, and so we're going to get started, and it also mentions what are called Swift Playgrounds, the things that you download into the app. It mentions which ones are used throughout this book. Now, I've just asked you to download the first one here, Learn to Code 1, but I will show you some of those other ones as we're going through and talking about the activities. Okay, and then it mentions a bit about everyone can create. I'm not going to spend time going into that at the moment. And then again, there's a link to the Swift Coding Club kit that we talked about earlier. So let's delve into the command section, the very first chapter. So it'll give you an introduction and some of the key vocabulary in there, and then it'll take you into the introduce the idea of commands. Now, there's obviously quite a lot of text in here, and I would suggest that you'd probably want to teach this rather than get students to read through it. It is there if students wanted to try and work through it themselves, for example, but this is just the idea of if you were telling a robot to take the recycling out, what kind of instruction would you give? You might say take the recycling out, but then the robot might walk outside with the recycling and then be standing outside with the recycling in their hand. So how could you make that instruction more specific? And that ties really nicely into things like the crazy characters algorithm from Barefoot Computing. That similar kind of idea of making your instructions a bit more specific. Okay. And was there a question there? I just got the chat window there. Would it be possible to have access to these slides afterwards? Okay, yes, yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to share them. Is it possible to distribute them through Computing at School to the
attendees? Absolutely, I can send them on to everyone that's tuned in for the session.
Great, okay, brilliant. So, and then there's actually an activity in the classroom, again, to look at the idea of algorithms and getting those algorithms together. So students hide something in the classroom and they have to write instructions for their partner to find those, and they have to be very specific instructions. They swap instructions, try and follow them and see if they're successful, and then there's going to reflection on that. So similar to a lot of the unplugged activities we might be familiar with from kind of Barefoot Computing, and I think it would be really good to kind of swap out some of these activities for some of the Barefoot activities. Maybe some of those are algorithm activities they've done in Key Stage 1, and you can reference those and kind of activate that prior learning when you go into this. And then we go into the try section, and this is where we actually get into the Swift Playgrounds app and we start working through the activities. So what I'll do now is just go back to my iPad screen and I'll open the app up and just show you those first activities and give you a chance to try them yourself. So I'll just pause after that. And like I said, they're really straightforward activities to get started with, and they're scaffolded nicely, so they do get more difficult quite quickly. So I'll show you some of the more difficult ones afterwards. But yeah, they're scaffolded and they start really nicely. So back to my iPad, and let's just tap on the Playgrounds app. Okay, so I'm going to go into Learn to Code 1. Now I've been using this playground before, so I just want to tap on the drop-down menu at the top and go right back to start. So I'm going to tap on the introduction slide, and that'll take me right back to the introduction. Now you can see how students could just use the Swift Playgrounds app. It does give a short introduction, but I don't think after these kind of 8 slides that talk through things, students would have a very deep or secure knowledge of what an algorithm is, for example. So yeah, it's good to have those reminders, but it definitely, using them with the Everyone Can Code curriculum, I think is quite important. So we can go through, it introduces you to some of the characters, our little character Byte, and it shows you what the code looks like as well. So I'm going to start coding. Now, again, some of these I've already done. So what I want to do is actually just reset my page and start again. And that we can do that from the 3 dots in the top middle of the page. So I'm just going to tap reset page. And that's just going to blank my page out, and I can see how well students will see it for the first time. So I can take 2 fingers and just move around on my iPad. I'm going to zoom in a little bit there, and I can see what the problem is here. I need to give instructions to my character Byte. I need to get him or her to move forward to collect a gem. Incidentally, if students, I've made a card. So the terrible mistake of calling Byte him there, but of course they're different characters. If students want to choose different types of characters there, they can tap on Byte and they can choose a different one, and different activities choose different ones as well. So just to let you know there. Okay, what I really like also is that you don't go straight, if you're following the Everyone Can Code curriculum, you don't go straight into issuing commands and doing it. You actually asks you to take a screenshot and plan what you're going to do beforehand. So you're taking your knowledge of what you've been doing with algorithms as precise instructions, and it shows you then how to take a screenshot and annotate that screenshot to go through to start that programming activity. So I'm going to just do a screenshot now. On the iPad, it's the home button and the power button at the same time. Unless you're lucky enough to have one of those big iPad Pros, which have got a slightly different way of doing screenshots. And yeah, so it suggests then that you just work out how many it's going to need to move forward: 1, 2, and 3. And then I might use a different color for this, but byte then needs to collect the gem. So I'm just going to write C in there. So that's planning. That's my kind of algorithm for this. So move forward 3 times and then collect the gem. Collect the gem. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to tap now to enter my code. And you'll see here, I don't have to worry about syntax to start with, or until much later actually, because I've got the 2 commands that I will need for this particular activity. So I start with move forward. So I need 3 times. So I'm just going to choose move forward 3 times. I'm going to tap collect gem, and I'm going to tap run my code. So let's see if that works. Okay, fantastic. So I've done that. I can move on to my next page. And again, you can follow through then with the Everyone Can Code curriculum, and that takes you through. So we've done, takes you through next to adding another command. Again, it suggests you screenshot and you do your planning. So move forward twice, turn left, move forward twice, and then collect the gem. So go back to my iPad. I've done this already, so I won't spend time programming that, but you get the idea. So I've got move forward, turn left, move forward, collect gem. Okay. And then you go forward and you get another command. So gradually just building up some different commands for you to use. This time you need to toggle a switch. So again, you can tap in the code area if you haven't done it already, and you'll be presented with the code that you can use at the bottom there. So we've now got as far as 4 different commands. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is just give you a few moments to have a go at that. So have a go at just going to the introduction, issuing commands, adding a new command, toggling switch, and just see how far you get with that. And we'll just take about 5 minutes to do that. And then, yeah, I mean, if you get as far as toggling switch, feel free to then post in the questions area. Oh, what happens if they go wrong? Yeah, really good point. So let's do that. So and indeed they will. So they will need to debug. So I'm going to run my code. Oh, you can't see my screen. Let me just swap back to my iPad screen. Yeah. Okay, so let's see what happens. So I've not got enough move forwards. Okay, so nothing's happened, byte's just standing there. And you might have noticed that this little hint area here just wobbled, and you can tap on that to get a little bit more help as well. And if you really want to, and again, you're going to be seeing students do this, so you can keep an eye on what they're doing. But there is an option there to show solution. But yeah, it's up to you. Need to manage kind of students and making sure that they don't just go to that area straight away. But yeah, so then you would need to then debug and look at what other things you need to add into your program to make it work. Okay, so yeah, just about 5 minutes just to have a look at that and get started with that before I move on to some of the other areas in there as well. Okay. Okay, Katie, and I can see, Katie, you said that you don't have an iPad, so you can't play at the moment. So just, yeah, maybe a quick cup of tea time or something. So I'll just give you a few moments and I'll start back shortly, okay?
Christian, can I just ask you a quick question whilst people are
Yeah.
You go at this. I'm here having a go as well. And at the
Yeah.
bottom where it says "Run my code," to the left of it, there's something that looks like a little analog kind of dial, and I've clicked on that. I'm just
Yeah.
exploring, and I really like. So you can run it, but you can also step through my code and step
Mm.
slowly. And I'm just playing around with it. I'm presuming that's to sort of really help with discussions around the logic of what pupils have gone for, so they can really see those different steps being executed one at a time. Do you use that much when you're working with pupils?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really excellent point. And the way I've used that with students before most is when they're in debugging. So if they've got a problem,
Right,
using
yeah.
that step through to see where the error might be, if they're struggling to follow the instructions they've put. But absolutely, yeah, I mean, it would be that's a really good idea. Thank you for that. Then, like in terms of getting them to be able to talk about their code and what they've done.
Yeah, because I'm sure that in older versions of Scratch, I'm just loading it up on my computer here. Wasn't the one where it used to kind of highlight the different blocks as it went through? Or am I imagining
Yeah,
that?
yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah.
I don't think it's in there anymore, because sometimes the code can run so quickly it makes debugging more difficult.
Yeah.
I like that.
And in terms of them talking about it as well, I mentioned in a moment, so you can actually record your solution as well, turn it into a video. If you want to evidence what you've done, that can be quite useful in the way you've gone for that solution.
Yeah, so Haley's saying in the questions, the step-by-step just helped me to debug. Carol also said, how do you move code? Then she said, I've worked it out, but other people might
Right.
also be struggling. So let's go through that
Yeah.
if you don't mind.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's a really good point. So if you tap on a collection of codes, like collect for example, um, you can just tap on it. You could choose delete from this menu, but I could have tried to get used to just using the backspace button here. So you've got that's effectively the backspace button. You can press on that to delete the code. It's worth mentioning you've got this little arrow here, and that brings up the keyboard. So if a student really wanted to, they could have a go at typing the code as well. So they could have a go at typing the code themselves. But yeah, you can bring that up if you want to use the backspace there. They could delete it using that. And then on the iPad, it's this little button in the bottom right corner just to hide the keyboard again. So yeah, that one there brings up the keyboard, or there's that backspace, and that's the return key just there, and that just sits at the bottom. You also got your undo and redo buttons in the bottom left corner. So I can see a few people have done that. Haley, yeah, so they helped you debug. Brilliant. Okay, so you may not have got through all of that, but I think I'm just going to carry on now, just looking at the time, if that's okay, just to look at some of the different areas through there. Okay. So I'll just come back to my presentation. In fact, I'll just pop back into the Books app. So just in case you didn't spot that whilst you were working through it, I just mentioned a couple of things I was going through there. I talked about deleting code, backspace, return, bringing up the keyboard with this button here. Something else that I should mention is that these three dots in the middle can be quite useful, especially in evidencing the work that you've done. So it's good to work through this in class, through the materials, but you could, if someone wanted to go off ahead, they could go off and work ahead on this if a particular student wanted to go ahead. In terms of evidencing this, you can record a movie. So if you tap record movie, now unfortunately it doesn't work whilst I'm sharing my screen, so it won't work for me right now, but if you're just sat on an iPad normally, that record movie button will bring up a red circle. You can tap on that and it will film your solution. You can tap take a picture and it will do a screenshot of your code and your solution there. And then that will save it to the camera roll, so you could then submit it to your teacher through whatever workflow you use. So something like Seesaw, for example, if you're using that. So let's go on to have a look at some of the other areas here. I'm going to jump right forward, if that's all right, to variables. Please bear in mind whilst we're having a look at this, this does get introduced quite gradually to students. The one but I'd like to look at the try bit of this, but also the apply bit, because we haven't looked at an apply bit yet. So I'm going to jump forward to here and look at the variables section. Don't worry, I'm not expecting you to follow this, but you might want to try it afterwards. So I'm going to go through variables. So it gives you some ideas for variables. I really like the unplugged activity that it gives us here. The idea of this is to understand the idea of variables by creating a news story and having some blank areas, some kind of adjectives and nouns and verbs, for example, that you can place in those gaps. So you can write your news story, and then you can have other people have a go at filling in different nouns and adjectives and things like that. And you'll come up with a range of news stories, some of which might be quite amusing as well. So nice kind of English activity there as well, an English language activity that you can work on, but also gets that idea of variables across quite nicely. And then you go to the try section, and this refers to Learn to Code 2, but also applies it in a couple of different ways. So I'd like to show you that. Yeah, please remember you gradually get to this stage. So if this looks really a little bit daunting, you will be, if you work through the activities, you'll see that you do get to them quite gradually. So this is the start of Learn to Code 2. And in fact, let me just reset my page. So it's how students would see it when they first came to it. So in this one, you can, it talks about variables, and you get your first variable on here. So something called a gem counter. And you need to initialize the value at the start of this program because you want it to be at 0 at the start. So you can tap on value, the keyboard will pop off, and we can just tap 0. And then you can tap in the enter code section. Now to start with, it just wants you to make the value of the variable correct. So it's just going to ask you to move forward. So I've got by this stage, we've tried lots of different codes. So we've got many more commands at the bottom. So I'm going to move forward, and I'm going to click the gem, and I'm going to go tap on gem counter, and then it will show me what I can do next. So I'm going to do gem counter equals, and I want it to equals 1. Okay, so that's my solution for this particular one. So I can run that and go through, and my character goes through, collects the gem, and the gem counter goes up by 1. Okay. Now there's lots of other things to work through there, and eventually, of course, you get to code such as gem counter equals gem counter plus 1, which is a much more effective, and that within a loop, so they can go around and it adds 1 each time it picks up a gem. But it goes to that very gradually and works through that in that section. But in the book, it also references some other activities, and I'd just like to quickly look at those. So spirals is one of them. So this is another playground that you can download. Again, all of these are free to download within the app. And this is about cycloids. Now, you don't need to learn about cycloids. You can still, this is learning about variables and the things you can change in it. But you can try out different things in the code. You have the code ready for you, but you can try changing them. So there's a nice kind of link to art here as well. You can change the radius of the track, for example. You can change the radius of the wheel. And again, I'm showing this very quickly. You'd spend a bit longer looking through and learning all of these, trying out all these different things. So different variables that you can change within here. You can change the background color if you want. So actually green wouldn't be a very good one because it won't show up. Let's choose something dark. And the speed that it draws as well. So maybe a bit faster. And then if I tap run my code, I'm going to get some different patterns just by changing those variables. So I think that's a really interesting kind of another way to apply, just looking at those variables, but you're doing it using a different context, having a look at kind of creating art with it. And this last one is kind of activity we might do quite a bit later on in secondary school in Python. And you'll know your class and you'll know whether they're going to be comfortable with doing this kind of activity. But there's a little program here that will just ask your birth date, your favorite number, and your favorite color, or spelt without a U, unfortunately. But we can go through here, and then you can add your, in fact, I'll just get rid of the code at the end. students can then type their own code or add their own code at the end there to display something that's been asked for. So they're now starting to store some of that information. So let's just go to here and show. I'm just going to delete. Let's just bring up my keyboard here. And again, you're expected to do this straight from the start, but it takes you gradually through these things. So I'm going to say show. I want to say I also love the color. Spell it correctly now. And then plus button. But I have to. This is the variable, so I have to type in that spelling of it. Okay, let's run my code. I'm definitely not going to tell you my birth date, so I'll just pick a random one there. And favorite number, let's go for 4. And favorite color, for blue. And then there's that bit of code that I added in. I also love the color blue. So you can bring a message up here, and you could use any of that input information into there. And that can be a really nice extension activity for students to go on to who are particularly confident with this. So I'm very aware that I need to wrap up now in the next few minutes. So let me just quickly go into back into my presentation and just finish off with a few considerations. So hopefully you can see how that can be quite useful to work through. It does take a while to look through all those resources. There's some really nice other ones. One I thought I'd mention is Cipher, which just takes the idea of a Caesar cipher and encryption, and you can take your name, you can encrypt it there and unencrypt a message that you found in the library. Really nice interactive kind of thing there. If you've got Lego Mindstorms, if you're lucky enough to have that in school, there's a really great activity that I spent a whole day with some year 6s just after SATs actually. A whole day working through this EV3 animal rescue, and it's a really nice kind of immersive idea of you've got this turtle who's got a broken leg, and you have to design a leg for the turtle, and then you have to use the sensors in the EV3 kit to sense when it gets to a branch so that it can stop and actually eat the fruit off the branch and things like that. So it's a really elaborate kind of story there, but you get to apply a lot of those skills in there. So if you have Mindstorms, that's really good activity there. Final couple of considerations around Apple, and I will just mention these and not go into too much detail, but Apple Classroom is really useful if you're using iPads in the classroom. It lets you see what the students are doing on the devices. It lets you lock their screens. You can share documents with them via it and things like that. So speak to your IT support about getting that set up if you don't already have that set up. And Apple Schoolwork is one option for workflow. I know there's things like Seesaw people are using, Google Classroom as well. Schoolwork is the one from Apple that's worth having a look at. So really quick mention about our computing hub. We're running a lot of the remote courses at the moment that teachers can sign up to for free. You can find all of those on teachcomputing.org and follow us on Twitter as well to find out more about it. So there's free remote learning online. There are bursaries available as well, so in some cases your school will get paid for you to be doing those courses. And there's also a home teaching initiative running still for the next few weeks to support people at home. That's our Twitter feed I mentioned earlier, and that's my email address should you wish to get in contact. Thank you very much. And I'll finish there. I'm happy to take any questions to finish off with.
Yeah, super. Thank you so much, Christian. That was fantastic. I've really enjoyed having a bit of a tinker here with Scratch Playground. There has been a few, sorry, not Scratch Playground, Swift Playground, a few questions that have come through. Can anyone create a playground? What's the process? It's one of the questions that's come through.
Yeah, so create a playground from scratch. You can. So I don't mean from scratch as in the online Scratch. I mean from the start. So, okay, let's use that terminology. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it is quite challenging to do that though. So I'd probably think about using the ones that are there. You need to be quite confident with the Swift programming language to be able to do that. I know one teacher who has been doing that for their students, but yeah, you need to be pretty confident with Swift. But there are so many.
Yeah, you've shown so many that are already created within the app. It would make sense. use those.
And it's probably worth mentioning as well that there's if you've got physical computing kit, there are playgrounds that you can download to control them. So, for example, for a microbit, there's a playground for a microbit where you can program a microbit using Swift, and things like the spheros. If you have spheros as well, you can link it into that.
So one of the other questions was, you mentioned about Lego Mindstorms. Is there anything that will work with Lego WeDo?
I just saw that question come through, and I don't know the answer to that. So I would have to Google it. So yeah, I check with Google. I'm not aware of it.
Okay.
But it would, yeah. So yeah.
We can all do some
Quite
Googling on that one afterwards. We can all do
Yeah,
some.
sorry about that.
Right, and then
Not sure
another question was about what app are you using to screen share your iPad?
Okay, that's a good question. Sorry, I just realised I didn't turn my video on again. Yeah, really good question. So I'm actually on a Mac. So I've got it connected with a lightning cable, and I've just got QuickTime open. So the built-in QuickTime, which is built into Macs, you can open that, and you can choose the input. You can go File, New Movie Recording, and you can just choose your iPad, which is called Mr. Certain there, as your input. But you don't have to have that. There is a brilliant app called Air Server that you can install on PC or Mac. I think it's $9.99, so yeah, £7 or £8, and you can just do that wirelessly actually. And on that you just go into you can go to the drop down menu, and then in this area here tap on that and choose the name of your laptop as the thing to share to. So I'd really recommend Air Server. But yeah, in this case, I was just using QuickTime on the Mac.
There you go, a tech top tip to go along with the advertised content of today's session as well. That's super. Thank you so much, Christian. There were also lots of thank yous coming through, and lots of people excited to go and try the resources, as am I. So I'm just going to wrap things up, if that's okay, to say thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you to everyone for attending. When we finish the webinar now, a short evaluation will appear. Please do fill that out for us, because it really helps us getting your feedback for planning future events. And I hope to see you at some of the other sessions that we've got happening this week. So I will leave it there. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks again, Christian, and I will speak to you, or see you in sessions. Speak to you soon.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, everyone.
Cheers.
Goodbye.
Bye.